They are absolutely delusional. As we all know, the Toronto Raptors made a big swing at this year's trade deadline, acquiring Brandon Ingram in a package that sent out very minimal assets in order to bring Brandon Ingram back. A factor is his impending free agency as well as his injury status, and we've all been excited about his fit around a Scottie Barnes, as well as comments made from the young players on the roster, from the organization, about how well Brandon Ingram has been fitting within this Toronto Raptors team, despite not even playing a single game yet. So everything has been positive in terms of what we've heard about Brandon Ingram and how things have worked out, in terms of his tenure with the Toronto Raptors. Of course, very excited to see him on the court, but a new report, a new sort of take from New Orleans Pelicans outlet came out and absolutely ripped the Toronto Raptors, calling the team this trade an absolute finesse for the New Orleans Pelicans. And frankly, it is the most delusional thing I've ever seen. So we're going to break down what this take is, break it down in terms of why this is just an absolutely stupid argument, and kind of dive into why Raptors fans are still extremely excited about Brandon Ingram being on the Toronto Raptors. So lots of stuff to dive into in this video. Before we do, folks, again, you guys have been crushing it, hitting that subscribe button, trying to get as many subs as we can to build up the team as we, push to capture that flag of the draft lottery just days away here now at this point. So make sure you guys hit that subscribe button if you don't want to miss a single thing regarding this Toronto Raptors team, especially as we lead up to some really exciting points out here in this off season. So lots of stuff to dive into, but folks, we all know the Toronto Raptors made this trade for Brandon Ingram out there at this year's trade deadline, sending out Bruce Brown, Kelly Olynyk, a first-round pick from the Indiana Pacers, and a second-round pick, future 2030 second-round pick for the Toronto Raptors. So that was the trade details, and then we acquired a guy that's been an all-star. It's one of the most elite guys in the NBA, but a new outlet. It's the time of off-season. People start spewing some crazy takes. New Orleans Pelicans outlet came out and had a lot to say. Essentially, from the Pelicans debrief, the New Orleans Pelicans convinced the Toronto Raptors to give up Bruce Brown, Kelly Olynyk, a 26 first and a 2031 second rounder for Brandon Ingram. This was after he could not work out an extension with New Orleans. Ingram was leaving the franchise and since fired David Griffin did a fantastic job at getting a real value for an expiring contract. And the headline of this article was, this was an absolute finesse for the New Orleans Pelicans, of that language, of those lines. And basically, it goes on to say, the Raptors quickly worked out a 3-year, $120 million extension, which proves they did not see him as overpaid. Toronto believes in the All-Star, but New Orleans had plenty of data on why this was a mistake. The Pelicans made the playoffs twice during his 6 seasons and never won a playoff round. Ingram was not the answer. To make matters worse for Toronto, the 27-year-old just played 18 games this season, and he never suited up for the Toronto Raptors. His last game this season was on December 7th, where Ingram had a severe ankle injury, which furthers a trend. So this is the initial context they're giving out to Brandon Ingram and stuff. I'll start off this with their kind of spiel on terms of why this is a bad deal for the Toronto Raptors and why this was a mistake. But essentially, they're coming out and saying this was an absolute steal, a finesse for the New Orleans Pelicans. The Raptors just made an absolute blunder in terms of acquiring Brandon Ingram out there from this Pelican squad. So that's their whole narrative. And in terms of diving into specifics as to the why this is a bad move, essentially, Brandon Ingram struggles to stay out there on the floor. He played 79 games during his rookie season with the Lakers. His next highest game total was 64, and that was in 2024. He's appeared in fewer than 60 games in 5 of his last 8 years and averages just 42% over the past 3 seasons. So not what you'd expect from someone making $40 million per year. Over the last 4 seasons, the Pelicans went 53-93 when Ingram was out and 95-87 when he played. They would have been back in the play-in mix if it was the healthy BI. Instead, the team finished with the 4th worst record in the NBA. So firstly is the injury situation, and we'll talk about this because this is all factored into the price and the discussions there on this front. So that's the first main crux of their argument. The second one is the Pelicans were letting him go either way. Fans should look at this trade as a massive win. Ingram was not playing for the Pelicans in the 2025-2026 season. To get 2 role players, including Kelly Olynyk, and 2 draft picks was a massive win. Olynyk is under contract for the upcoming season and will be a valuable rotation big man. New Orleans will have the Pacers' 26th first-round pick to upgrade their roster in the distant second rounder as a trade chip. So this is their discussion and why they threw out a giant headline, a giant sort of take on how, this is a finesse for the Pelicans. This is something they cooked the Toronto Raptors on. The Raptors are stupid for making this deal. All of those types of things. And frankly, I don't think the arguments they laid out make any sense in terms of supporting their arguments. I mean, firstly, they brought up the record with Ingram and without him, and I'll show that there again, right? This leans in the favor of why Ingram is a great player. Like 53 and 93 when he was out, and 95 and 87. Again, it's not like some ludicrous record, but the Pelicans have been a good team. That win differential is absolutely ridiculous. And a lot of people saying, oh, Ingram's not a win now player, or he's not a winning guy. He's just a stat sheet stuff and stuff. This specific stat that they threw out there indicates that Brandon Ingram is a winning guy. And yes, the injury situation is something that is a concern with Brandon Ingram, and it's factored in the price. Because if we look at the price of this trade, the whole argument, the Raptors weren't keeping Bruce Brown. He was just a trade chip to facilitate one of these deals. Kelly Olynyk, with the Raptors moving in that younger direction, I mean, Chris Boucher wasn't even getting run at the end of this season. So, Jonathan Mobo was going to swallow up all of those minutes instead of a Kelly Olynyk. So, even though I think he's a good basketball player, he wasn't going to fit on this team longer term. And then that first round pick, look at how good the Pacers has been over the course of this year. With a healthy Haliburton for an entire season, that pick is going to be in the late 20s, going forward out there in the future, and then a distant second. The Raptors gave up essentially a very, very late first-round pick, two guys that weren't really factored into the Raptors' future, for a dude that, if we look at the stats, 22 points per game, 5.6 rebounds, 5.2 assists, 37% from the three-point line at just 27 years old, that you extended. There's no risk of him leaving. Of course, the risk at the time would be if Brandon Ingram didn't sign an extension or wanted something ludicrous, contract extension to stay. That's something that wouldn't work. The Raptors got him on a very reasonable deal and a shorter-term deal, so even if the injury situation turns into something that's not manageable, the Raptors are out from under the contract after a couple seasons. So that is just absurd. And Kelly Olynyk, Bruce Brown, you see the stats. They're not something that's going to be overwhelming you in terms of how impactful they are as specific guys. And I think people underestimate how good Brandon Ingram is. There are only 10 players in the NBA last season that averaged over 22 points per game, 5 rebounds, and 5 assists. Only 10. And you look at those names, that is phenomenal company to be in. Giannis, Jokic, Doncic, Jason Tatum, Kate Cunningham, Zion Williamson, who, when he's healthy, is a phenomenal player out there on the court. LeBron James, Tyler Hero, who had a breakout season this year, James Harden, and Brandon Ingram. That is an extremely short list that if you can get a guy in that group, in that stature, in that standing in terms of caliber basketball player for Bruce Brown, Kelly Olynyk, a first-round pick, a second-round pick, that is an absolute win, a steal, just a robbery for the Toronto Raptors. Now, again, I've thrown out the term robbery, steal, heist, all that stuff, in terms of this. This is a heist for the Raptors, but it wasn't like the Pelicans got finessed. I think they were getting off of Ingram. They didn't have much leverage, so they got a decent haul in return. And that's if the headlines and stuff, the roasting of the Toronto Raptors is involved in this article, wouldn't be that, frustrating. But the Raptors absolutely got an absolute win, a robbery in terms of the NBA. It's more of a robbery in the NBA. I'm surprised no other teams tried to swoop in and try to get this type of deal for Brandon Ingram out here at this point, because again, that's a factor. And the last factor as well, right? Like Jamal Shead made a whole video on this recently. Came out and said, Brandon Ingram, he has no ego. He's not arrogant. He just excites us to play with a guy like that is that good at basketball. And Brandon Ingram has just been a perfect culture fit. People really enjoy him, how he's impacting this team, and his fit around Scottie Barnes. He's a complimentary star. And rarely do you get players that complement each other so well in terms of one of these trade packages. So I am ecstatic with this move. I think it's crazy that people are insinuating this was a just dumb deal for the Toronto Raptors. I wanted to give my 2 cents on it. Let me know what you guys think about this in the comment section down below. You guys, the best thing is far, subscribe to the channel if you guys haven't already. Anyways, I'm signing out.